Alright. God, I've been focusing on just trying to get everything set up so far and not actually thinking about what game I'm going to be playing. Yeah, why not? Alright, I think we're good. Alright. Oh. Morning, everybody. Happy May 4th. Happy fucking Star Wars Day. How is it? How is everybody today? Because it's just 9 o'clock in the morning. I am still not used to the morning schedule, but this is preferable than if I were to start later and then have nothing left for my day. So, I planned on playing the Star Wars game today, but I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure if I should be playing a Star Wars game right now, or if maybe we could do something a little beforehand. I still haven't completely decided what Star Wars game we're gonna play. I might even play like maybe not like an old game, but maybe like Jedi Survivor, if nothing else. So I'd have to purchase it on this account, which thankfully they have a deal going on right now for that. Plus, there's already $5 on this account, so it'll be even cheaper. Technically. But otherwise, yeah, so Star Wars is it's a really interesting franchise. I used to be such a Star Wars nerd back in the day as a kid. Before I got into anime, before I got into literally anything else, I was a big fucking Star Wars nerd. And over time, right, Star Wars has kind of aged. Most people assume that it would age like milk to a degree, but no, it's only aged finer than the finest wines from all the greatest vineyards, because you could not fuck Star Wars harder than how Disney has fucked Star Wars. You could not. Star Wars has always been like has always existed in an interesting place for myself. It's always been this this pretty cool and amazing franchise that's based in a galaxy far, far away that has always managed to fascinate and intrigue me. But at the same time, right? Oh, hang on. I just realized something. But, at the same time, right? Star Wars has been like one of those franchises that, for all of the cool stuff, for all the cool things that it has and all the stuff that it does do, there's always been it's always been very much like an acquired taste. I've always liked Star Wars. I've never hated Star Wars. There we go. Okay. The only part of Star Wars that I don't care for is the stuff that came after when Disney bought it. And though Disney fails continuously to replicate the same magic of the original trilogy, as well as even just matching prequel level quality, there has been some decent content that's come out from the new Disney Star Wars stuff that's been pretty good. Like Respawn's Jedi series. There's also fucking like some other games made by EA that are also kind of neat. no one else but EA has really made anything out of the Star Wars IP so far. And the even stranger thing, right, is that the only company that actually bothered to make a Star Wars game outside of, well, Respawn and EA are fucking Ubisoft, and Ubisoft is, I mean, they made this thing called Star Wars Outlaws, and it looks like a kind of a crappier version of, I'm not even sure what the fuck it is. It basically looks like every other Ubisoft game ever made, just with a Star Wars coat of paint. I don't know what to make of that abomination. But anyways, Star Wars is a really nice... I cannot talk right now. I'm trying to get my gamer subs to kick in. But yeah, they've been making new announcements for Zero Company. We still have yet to hear anything about the Star Wars remake for Knights of the Old Republic, because Knights of the Old Republic is a great game, a very great game that I wish would be remade, but for some reason Sony decided that they were going to fuck that into oblivion. They were looking at what Aspyr was doing. They're just like, nah, we're just gonna have somebody else do it. And strangely enough, they're gonna have fucking Saber Interactive work on that thing. And I wasn't sure about what Saber Interactive was gonna do with that, with the Star Wars remake for KOTOR. And I wasn't too sure about the quality of it, but ever since, I played Space Marines 2, I have a lot more faith in it. Since, they they basically made Space Marines 2, but it's gonna be interesting to see what they do with that. I still remember the reasons why they said that they didn't want to do it, and the reasons why they decided to take it away from Aspyr was because they wanted something that was more God of War like, or they wanted something that's what was it? They wanted something that was either more God of War like or something that focuses on something. It's something that focuses more on something more cinematic, and I thought to myself, what the fuck are you talking about, Sony? The game the game could be a cinematic experience based off of fucking movies, for fuck's sake. It's got rich storytelling in there. It's just a matter of getting the graphics and the gameplay up to snuff, and even then, it's an RPG. What the fuck do you mean also by God of War style gameplay? It's not a hack and slash game, Sony. I don't know what you're thinking this is, but it's not like that. But yeah. So we haven't heard anything about the KOTOR remake. I'm almost convinced that it's basically dead, but with Saber being behind the project, I'm kind of curious as to what Saber is actually doing with it. But they still have yet to release anything, say anything about it. And I'm just kind of not sure what's going to happen with KOTOR. But yeah, they're also making Zero Company, which is basically a tactics Star Wars game. And that's being headed by a team that works, I believe, under Respawn. I'm not too sure. I just know that Respawn is credited as one of the game companies making it. I know the developer is different. But yeah. Ay. Yeah, Star Wars is one of those franchises too that also has like a lot of fan films, among other things, asserted into it. I don't think, and there's even lore stuff we could delve into. I have never actually, I mean, I have delved into a lot of lore videos, but I have never truly been someone who has ever really had a reason to really oh, that's right. I remember that one. Oh, that actually would be pretty cool. The fucking episode 3 movie tie-in was actually pretty goated. I wish they would bring that back to PC or something. Anyways, I'm kind of everywhere with this intro. But the long and short of it, Star Wars is, despite the fact that it's a great franchise and that I like the franchise, right? And I only want what's best for it. They can't seem to do anything with it to save their fucking life. And in regards to like some of the stuff that we've been seeing recently, it hasn't been a whole lot. I also feel like that the actual movies and Star Wars content side of things is also kind of starting to really lack as of recent, because it seems like Lucasfilm under Kathleen Kennedy doesn't really know what the fuck it's doing. Like, I don't know who to blame for any of the decisions that get made here, other than maybe Kathleen herself. It's kind of hard not to, considering that she's the one steering the ship. She has final say on a lot of things, and nothing that gets made is really anything worth noting. It's kind of annoying. And then the stuff that does get licensed and talked about is usually kind of not that great. At least when it comes to comics, among other things. Games are pretty good. The games have been of a consistent quality so far. But the comics, among other things, is something that's always been a bit meh. And don't even get me started on the movies, because unless you want to listen to me rant a little bit about the fucking Star Wars movies, for the first 2 that I've seen, and the one that I do not dare to even bother sitting through to watch, it is certainly something. I've never been that much of like an in-depth lore enthusiast for Star Wars, but I do enjoy delving into a bit of the lore when it comes to like how stuff works, and among like how like the history of certain characters, among other things, right? But I have never been that knee deep into the Star Wars content personally. I've always enjoyed like watching and playing them so much as not really reading it. But yeah. Star Wars is just in such a weird place right now, because it's not in a very good spot. It's very much just kind of existing in the foreground. It's basically stuck in limbo. And there's a debate if it's actually going to come back in any fashion. And honestly, I don't think it's going to. I don't think Star Wars is going to come back in any major fashion, because for Star Wars to come back, right, they'd have to start making Star Wars content again. And I don't fucking think they're going to be able to make decent Star Wars content outside of, like, the occasional video game and stuff like that. I have a friend of mine who's just like, I'm glad that they're actually diversifying and actually, like making, like the games are becoming a little different. And it's just like, well, sure. The game, like having the games come out and be a little different here and there, and also just among other things, is pretty nice and all. But it's just like, if we only have to look forward to games off this series, that's going to be real fucking sad. I mean, Star Wars used to be great in terms of, you know, it was a culmination of many things. It was a culmination of comics. It was a culmination of books. It was a culmination of several fucking things. The movies were good. Even if you didn't really care for the movies and you thought the quality was weird, you know, like the movies were good. Oh God, Star Wars Republic Commando would be a nice game to remake. I would even offer, right, to play Star Wars Republic Commando. But the only reason why I'm not gonna do that, and I can't do that, is because for some bizarre reason, right, my Star Wars Republic Commando, despite the fact that I have it in my Steam library, it doesn't work. I've tried playing it. I tried getting it to work on several occasions. It just doesn't work. I don't know what it is. Like, as much as I would like to play this game, as much as I would love nothing more than to even potentially stream it. How to fire the gun. Complete Fix HD Edition. Yeah. As much as I would love to play it, for some bizarre fucking reason, I can't get it to work on the computer. Because every time I try to start the game, no matter what resolution setting or otherwise I put it on, it just fucking crashes. And I don't know what's wrong with it. I've tried looking at the solution. I've tried troubleshooting it. I've even went as far as like verified files, uninstalling, reinstalling it at one point, and nothing worked. But yeah. In the meantime, I wonder why the Critical Drinker actually made a video on this. Revenge of the Sith humiliates Disney Star Wars. I'm not sure what that's about. My phone buzzed. What is that? Software update. Well, gee, thank you. Notify me of that crap. Alright. Well, yeah, we could even play Fallen Order. Star Wars is Dead by Asmongold. I'm kind of curious, but I'm not curious at the same time. I just have no faith. I have no faith whatsoever in anything that Disney does with this goddamn franchise. Let me see. Is there any sort of mentionings about the KOTOR remake? I'm kind of curious now. 1 month ago. 3 years ago. God, it's been 3 fucking years since the announcement. First KOTOR remake update of 2025 is strange. By 100% Star Wars. I don't know. I'm inclined to take a look at it. Ah.
Certainly been a while, hasn't it? I hope you're all keeping well and having a great start to 2025. And talking of 2025, we've got our first little update about the Knights of the Old Republic remake. And it is an interesting one. However, it's a little bit strange and a little bit confusing. And weirdly, most of the press have missed it. And I'll explain why in a moment. Now, this is a little bit delayed. This information came out a few days ago, but better late than never, right? So, the last time we heard anything official from any members of Saber Interactive regarding the KOTOR remake was pretty much a year ago now, just after Saber was sold by Embracer to Beacon Interactive, and the CEO of Saber, Matthew Karch, stated on record that the game was alive and well, and that they were dedicated to exceeding expectations with the remake. And
You know, I heard the same thing from Aspire. They even got an entire, like, they had... Aspire got, like, a bunch of, like, really interesting people on board, and they even did a couple of things, right? Where they decided that they were going to not only get, like, some of the old voice cast back together again for it, but they were also going to... Like, they had an entire development team that was specific around this game because everybody was so motivated to make this remake into something perfect, right? And then Sony just canned it. And it really made me wonder why the fuck did Sony can the thing? And the reasons they gave was pretty bullshit if you ask me. Like, if I asked Sony, right, and I asked Sony, why'd you cancel something, and they gave me reasons like it's not God of War and we want something that's pure cinema, I look at Sony, right, with this dumbfounded this stupid ass look on my face, and I'd be like, are you fucking retarded? Are you stupid? What the fuck did you just say? Oh yeah, we canned it because it wasn't a game of all time, you know? It wasn't going to be breaking records like a certain other game by a certain other developer. It's fucking what? I mean, at least it's better than, oh, it's not a fucking free-to-play bullshit-ass shovelware-ass game that we can easily monetize to hell and back, like EA would say. You know, because fuck them, too. I mean, it's amazing. This is truly astonishing, right? That EA, even after all this time, is still the only company that seems to be doing something with Star Wars IP, despite the fact the exclusivity license is fucking gone. It's been revoked. What the fuck? That part still creases me. It still creases me. How do we live in a world, right, where anyone can make a Star Wars game, and no one has bothered to make a goddamn Star Wars game? Like, literally anyone can make a Star Wars game right now. At least as far as I understand it, right? Because the exclusivity license is gone. They don't have an exclusive license to make Star Wars games. And for some reason, the only people who've actually touched it is fucking Ubisoft. Ubisoft. And the only thing they did with it is create another bullshit-ass open-world game. What? How is this happening? It just boggles my mind. Ugh. Anyways. But yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, the state of Star Wars.
And then the last thing we heard in any official capacity was that the game was mentioned in a press release about 6 months ago, conveniently missing the word remake in the title, which I speculated could have been significant, but
It's missing remake in the title? Okay, so that tells me a couple of things. Saber's gonna either gonna pull an Aspire, right? And is gonna be remastering the thing for newer hardware. Or it's going to come back, or it's just gonna be an entirely new story and calling itself Knights of the Old Republic. or maybe it's not even going to call it that. It's probably going to call itself like well, not the Old Republic, because that's the MMO. It's probably going to call itself something of the sort, right? It's probably going to call. I don't know what that entail. What that's going to entail. That sounds like a fucking recipe for disaster under any other circumstances. It's weird that they dropped the name. They dropped the idea of calling it a remake. I mean, it's the only other thing I can think of that they're probably doing with it is that they're remastering it. But even then, it's just like, why would you want to remaster this? Why would you want to remaster this? Like, sure, yeah, give us the same game, but just with like a better coat of paint. Throw this thing into Unreal Engine like fucking Bethesda did with Oblivion, right? But I don't want to play Knights of the Old Republic. I don't want to play Knights of the Old Republic with newer gen graphics. I want to play Knights of the Old Republic restylized and reimagined as a different type of game, right? I mean, fuck. It's clear that we can do turn-based combat even, because Claire Obscure just came out. It dropped out of fucking nowhere, and that game's been a fucking blast. How are we fucking this up? How could we possibly fuck this up? Everything indicates that it can only go up from here, so long as you don't actually fuck up the things that people like about Knights of the Old Republic. It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense in any other context. It's like, how... Let's just move on from that.
I digress. Check that video out if you want to know more. But this all changed several days ago when both the CEO and the CCO, the Chief Creative Officer, both spoke about it in some capacity, although not necessarily directly. So as for the CCO, Tim Willits, he recently tweeted that Saber Interactive is one of the largest independent developers in the world. We are working on numerous games across many different genres. Everything that we have talked about is still in development. We will share information on upcoming games when we have something cool to share. Now, funnily enough, Tim tweeted this because they recently announced Space Marine 3 already, which led to many of the replies being about other titles like Jurassic Park, Toxic Commando, Knights of the Old Republic, Turok, Avatar, and how
Hey, Capcom, where the fuck is Dino Crisis? I actually have Dino Crisis. I have an emulation for it. I played a little bit of it, and I'm like, this would be kind of cool in a remake sort of fashion, like they did with Resident Evil. Where the fuck is it, Capcom? Where is our Dino Crisis remake? Oh, you don't want to make it? I don't fucking know. I don't know. I mean, Capcom's has been on a trip recently, remaking some of their most iconic games. And I feel like Dino Crisis is one of those games where it's just like, it's basically a Resident Evil clone, but with dinosaurs. You could easily just put that thing into Unreal Engine, or not Unreal Engine, or the RE engine, and hire a couple of people to basically just make Resident Evil inspired dinosaur game. It wouldn't be hard. I don't imagine it would be. And then plus it'll give them like the ability to re-exercise already treaded territory, because they've already got the mechanics in the space for it, right? Because they've already made Resident Evil 2 remake, they made Resident Evil 4 remake. The sky's the limit from here. And they have the bones already for it. They just need to actually bother making it. And I feel like a Dino Crisis remake would be an interesting one, but that's neither here or there.
the hell they keep announcing massive AAA games while only being one studio. But many people don't realise how big Saber Interactive are, with over 2,500 employees, which is nearly 3 times as big as CD Projekt Red, for example. And while Tim doesn't explicitly mention...
Well, I never knew that detail, but to be fair, I feel like Saber does put a lot of fingers in several pies. So, I mean, Saber is one of those type of studios, right, that makes a lot of games, or seems to be like, it seems to be a studio, a go-to studio if you want to get something like done right. And if Aspyr isn't porting all of the Star Wars games to different hardware, it's Saber basically going in, and it's just like, we're gonna basically like try to overcome the challenge of turning this game into this thing or something like that, right? Like they were the ones who helped to bring The Witcher 3 to the Switch, and that was only possible because they basically had to neuter the graphics on that thing to such a significant degree that it could be put on a cartridge and run on Switch hardware. And the way that they did that is that they basically like took the aesthetics of the game and turned it into something that's almost watercolor-esque. So that way it still keeps like a artistic look to it, but it doesn't like destroy the quality of it to such a significant, to such a degree that it looks like ass, right? Like they clearly worked really fucking hard to make that Switch port work as well as it does. And I commend them for that. I couldn't imagine. I mean, that was a really pretty game by the time it came out, and even by still to today's standards, that's still a really fucking impressive looking game. And I'm still excited to see what The Witcher 4 is going to turn into, but I'm not sure what The Witcher 4, where The Witcher 4 development is at the current moment. I know that there's been some talks around that. I know that there's been some people on the development team who've been kind of putting themselves into a negative spot because they were talking about something about wanting to punch gamers in the face or something like that. It's just, again, neither here or there. It's just like, I could not care about the office politics so much as like, well, what's that going to do to the game, right? Like, what's the game going to look like? And I've heard some comments from the team about maybe making Ciri a bit less old looking, and it's just like, that's not even the biggest issue. I know some people had an issue with her look. That's not my biggest issue. My biggest issue is, why the fuck is she a Witcher? Like, why is she a Witcher? You don't need to make Ciri a Witcher. That's the part that still baffles me. Is like, you don't need to make her a Witcher. She just needs to have her own character-defining story. Again, I see you could still have the Witcher story with Ciri, just not have her be a full-on Witcher. I mean, you could tell a far more interesting and nuanced story by making her the protagonist, and she's not even like officially, like physiologically a Witcher, but she does, like she was raised by Witchers, and so she was raised by Geralt specifically. So you can. So she has all of the honor and sort of like the skills and the training. She has all of the necessary means to basically be a Witcher, and it is basically very prideful of that fact. It could be very prideful of that fact. But then you could have her antagonist be a Witcher who is completely antithetical to that notion. It's just like that there is some clear and obvious parallels we could draw for an interesting story for such a fucking game, and I feel like they're kind of squandering that by making her into a Witcher. I feel like that there's a much more interesting story to tell if they just don't do that, but that, I don't know. They might have an interesting story in mind with her being a Witcher. I have no fucking idea. I just think it's a little weird to make her one, especially since a lot of people, didn't really like that shit, especially when Netflix tried to do that. Granted, the way Netflix was hinting at the possibility of like having a subplot of her potentially becoming one was kind of, they had to go through some character assassination level type of bullshit to do it, and I wasn't down for it either. But granted, the idea, I don't think the idea of her becoming a Witcher was ever really an idea that made sense or seemed sound on the surface. Like, it wasn't even an idea I think a lot of people truly contemplated as like a potential thing that could happen, because Geralt, Vesemir, and co. Like even just Geralt specifically just would not be entirely down for that. Like, I think he would try anything and everything under the sun to not have that be a thing that happens, even if she herself wanted that to be a thing that happened, right? I feel like that Geralt would try everything to make sure that Ciri did not have to become or go through the things that made him into a Witcher, and also, normally Witchers are made from at a young age, right? Like, you go through the trial of grasses at a pretty young age. She's a full-grown adult. What is that going to do to her physiologically? I could go on and on, but basically, it adds too many problems and too many questions than it does really add any sort of unique and interesting interpretations. And I feel like that's the part that I kind of disagree with the approach of making her into a Witcher. But moving on. We'll just move on.
As CD Projekt Red, for example. And while Tim doesn't explicitly mention Knights of the Old Republic, it can only be assumed KOTOR is one of those games still in development, as they have spoken about it within the last 12 months. Now, this is the information that the press picked up, so you may have heard about this already, but it's not the most interesting thing said about the Knights of the Old Republic remake in the last week, which, like I said, the press have weirdly ignored. So, a journalist by the name of Stephen Totillo, who is relatively reputable in the industry, claimed to have had an interview with the CEO, Matthew Karch, recently about Saber, Embracer, and all things surrounding the two companies. And of course, in this interview, the topic of Knights of the Old Republic came up, as it always does, and Matthew himself didn't have much to say, aside from the tried and true response of, "It's in development and we're working on it." However, what's very interesting is his PR rep apparently stated afterwards that regarding Star Wars, Saber want to let Disney and/or Lucasfilm take the lead when talking about any of the games that are tied to Star Wars and its characters. And to me...
Hold on. What the fuck does that mean? Disney wants to take the lead? Okay, hang on, wait. Okay, we know that Lucasfilm has been pretty hands-on when it comes to the development of certain games, as well as other expanded, not really expanded universe stuff, but it's like any type of like extensive media-esque stories and things relating to Star Wars. Like anything Star Wars could be doing right now, they've been getting all of their hands into that pie, and I feel like that half of the problems come from them, and the other half is that they don't do enough, right? And at least not enough, like, to mitigate certain potential disasters, right? It might even be like a problem that they themselves create inherently to begin with, but it's kind of debatable as to whether or not these are problems for a reason. Like the Ubisoft effect of like, we make Star Wars Outlaws. It's basically nothing new from every other game we've ever made. And their look and approach to that is probably on the lines of like, but is it narratively consistent with what we've already established? If that's the long and extent of how Outlaws got made, that's kind of disappointing. But when it comes to like other useless details, as like what they've been doing, like say with the High Republic stuff, nobody cares, right? Nobody cares about the High Republic stuff so much as they do the Old Republic stuff. And the High Republic stuff was supposed to be the Old Republic. They just wanted to repackage and respice that into something else. And it's like, you're not making something better than the Old Republic. Shut the fuck up. You're just not. You're not. And the fact that there's two monolithically game-changing, series, like game tie-ins based around that particular time period, you're not fucking around this. You're not gonna get around this. All right, you are not gonna make something better than the Old Republic and you're not gonna make anything better than Knights of the Old Republic. Fuck off. It was crazy, and they kind of just let that one fall by the wayside. It's just like, okay, fine, but the High Republic is still going to be a thing. It's just like, well, good, great for you, good for you. Nobody cares. And so the High Republic is basically like an Arthurian style like time period for like Star Wars, at least comic book wise. It's supposed to be a peaceful time period where the only thing that makes sense is the fact that the Jedi serve as more fundamental peacekeepers for the galaxy. But it's a little weird, because what stories do you tell with that setting in mind? Like, if the Sith aren't around in bulk, what story are you telling with that? Are the Jedi of this time period just solving political disputes, stopping pirates? What are we? Are they just handling petty crimes and all manner of criminal elements? Is that the stories that you're going to focus on? Because that's not nearly as potentially as interesting as, oh, but the Sith could be a problem that might have a hand in this thing, or whatever the fuck, right? And it's not as if the Sith couldn't exist in that time period, because the Sith is like, like they've been in secret hiding since after the Old Republic timeline, and because of the fact that there's like the rule of two needing to be established, and the fact that like the Sith had to hide due to their lack of numbers, among other things, and also because like being like they can't function in the same capacity that they used to. They have to essentially grow in power as singular individuals, as a very small as a small sort of like in group, and that made sense in a galaxy where you're basically surrounded on all sides. But I feel like that with in regards to like into making the High Republic, right? Like, what sort of stories can you tell when the easiest thing you could do, right, or the coolest stories you could tell is Jedi versus Sith type of stories, and that's kind of what people go, kind of want to see from Star Wars, is like, a battle of ideals clashing between glowing like sabers. It's like just basically slapping like laser swords together. It's kind of the big appeal, right? Especially for a casual audience. But I don't know. You could probably tell an interesting story just with, like without needing to drag the Sith into it, but I can't imagine that actually working. I mean, hell, the only TV show they made around the High Republic, they basically dragged the Sith into it, for fuck's sake. It really tells you about the well of creativity that they have with the High Republic series. Anywho, moving on.
This response is very the lead when talking about any of the games that are tied to Star Wars and its characters. And to me, this response is very, very strange. If you are a games developer and own the license to a property, you should be able to talk about the game you're working on. You shouldn't be delegating this to the original IP holder unless that's part of the original agreement. This would be like EA making Battlefront and never talking about it unless Disney made all of the official announcements, or Ubisoft never openly talking about Star Wars Outlaws unless it was just in response to something Lucasfilm had already announced. And it doesn't really make any sense either, especially when the whole point of Lucasfilm Games being reinstated was to simply be a support subdivision to help publishers and developers that it licensed its IP to, not to be a publisher or developer itself. And it's well known, I think, that Disney left the gaming market and now just offload their licenses to studios that want to make stuff with them. But then again, Disney did invest a hell of a ton of money into Epic to make some Disney Fortnite things, so maybe that was their sign they're trying to get back into the market, but I don't know. So, what exactly?
I don't know about any of that shit, but I know that Disney cannot make games. They don't understand fundamentally what makes games appealing. Like, they've only made... God, what games have they made? They've only ever made, like, Epic Mickey and among other things, right? In terms of, like, actual full-on games. And even then, they've also made shovelware equivalent to, like, free, like, mobile games. And it's not that... They're not that great. They've even done it to the Star Wars IP. It's... I'm not even gonna touch that. But it's... like, Disney's foray into the video game market has never been a solid one. It's always been shaky at best. And they've never made any truly standout games. Like, hell, the only Disney-esque thing that was good, that came into video game form was Kingdom Hearts. And that was made by Square Enix. So their ability to make games has always been subject to question. And even if we're just looking at just the games that they've actually made, they're not that very notable. They're very few and far between as well, as from what I understand. There's nothing truly noteworthy to speak of when it comes to their own titles, but even stuff that ties into their own franchises made by other companies, it's very much like a hit or miss type of thing. And as far as outside of Kingdom Hearts and Star Wars, I'm not sure if there's anything Disney specific that we could truly talk about that be, that's really landed in any fashion. I mean, I don't think there's really much else to say about that. As far as the Star Wars, as far as the KOTOR remake not having a sort of fucking only, I don't know. This information just seems so weird to me. It's okay, so you don't want to call it a remake anymore. That the remake portion of it gets kind of dropped, but also they're letting Disney kind of handle story decisions among other things. I was like, well, yeah, we already knew that fact, but it's what? It's I don't. Okay, you know what? Never mind. Let's just move on.
Could this mean? Why are Saber, the licensee, staying silent to let Disney take supposedly the lead with the KOTOR remake? Well, I think it could be one of two things. Firstly, perhaps for the first time in a very long time, given the failure of their partnership with Sony, given the size of Knights of the Old Republic and the expectation, they want to tackle this themselves, and maybe it's possibly Disney and or Lucasfilm that are taking up the mantle of publisher. Perhaps they are co-publishing with Saber and are focusing on the communicatory and marketing aspects of the game. No.
That could be a potential possibility, but honestly, I feel like that's the more hands-on that Disney in particular gets with the IP, the more it's likely to fuck up. I mean, granted, right, they could learn their lesson, and they could learn that not to put all of this stupid political modern-esque, all these stupid modernistic nonsense into the games. We don't need to have Type 1 and Type 2 body types in Star Wars. We don't need that. We don't need to have gender bent characters. We don't need to have characters acting out of turn or weird. We don't need to change anything for modern sensibilities with this particular fucking game, or especially not with Star Wars. It doesn't make any fucking sense to do that. The most they need to do, especially in this current juncture with this particular fucking game, is just make the game good and just retell the same story but better, right? It's all they need to do. It's just highlight and heighten the things that made the original game so good. And that's all they really need to do. They don't even need to write a script for it. They just have to make it good. They just have to make the game good. I don't understand why companies have such a hard time understanding this. It's just like, even if you're just retelling the same fucking story, that's preferable, right? Than you taking a fucking weird direction with it and then having it fall flat or be fucking ridiculous. It boggles my mind. Why can't you? Why is it this hard? It should just be simple. It really should just be simple. Just either give us the same story or tackle it in a different, or tackle it in a new and interesting way without destroying the thing that made it so special in the first place. It's the whole what I don't know how better way to say that. Then the idea that they want to get more hands-on with it, that's never been a question. That's always been a conclusion, because they've always been like that. Even before they made Lucasfilm Games, even before they restarted that fucking subdivision. It's like, they've always been hands-on with the projects. I think the fact that they brought back Lucasfilm Games is really interesting, because, why did you even get rid of it in the first place? If you were just going to bring it back. But, more than anything else, it's like, well, if it's just there for consulting related things, why are they answering specifically to you? Like, I get, yeah, we get it. They're the license holder and everything, but it's like, you have to ask yourself the inevitable question of just like, is it really a publishing thing? Is it really about publishing the game? Marketing the fucking thing? Or is it maybe that, I don't know. I'm kind of going into speculation territory now, but I don't trust Disney for anything. I just don't trust Disney to do anything correct. I don't even trust Lucasfilm to do anything correct, because Lucasfilm doesn't seem to know what the fuck it's doing half the time, because they have people in positions of power, and also just people who just are there that don't really know what the fuck they're doing. Even though they should just be some. I'm not even gonna fucking get too wrapped up in this. It's KOTOR is going to be a really interesting case study when eventually makes the rounds and eventually comes out, right? It's going to make for an interesting case study, because either this game is gonna hit and it's gonna hit well, or it's gonna fall fucking flat, and it's not gonna be pretty. I can only imagine where this game is gonna go when it eventually does get announced, and when it eventually, they do decide to actually release it. I'm just concerned that they're going to change too much, and it's going to piss off a lot of people, or it's not going to do, or it's going to do too little, in the sense that they're going to just turn it into a bona fide remaster of the same game, and it's not going to change anything at all. I'm genuinely concerned that the KOTOR remake is going to be a game that they either take a risk on and then they fuck it up, or that they don't take a risk on and they just play the safe approach of just repackaging the same game we've already played to death and just putting a new coat of paint on it. Kind of like how Bethesda did with Oblivion. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that I don't think we need a remaster so much as we need a remake. And that was one of the biggest draws to be a remake, was so that way it could be a more fully realized experience, because the tabletop RPG aspects of the inner workings of the game's quality is not what I would consider to be the best game game mechanics that could be in any game. I feel like, especially with the way the turn-based system works, I feel like the game definitely needs to have a revamp in terms of combat flair, among other things. I don't think we need to keep the bones of the actual gameplay in any fashion. I think keeping RPG elements in the game makes sense. I feel like you could have a decent RPG experience with this game. I mean, like, again, Clair Obscur, you could have flair, and you could have cinematic appeal with the turn-based systems. You just need to implement that. And even if you're not going to do that, just having a more fully realized RPG system and mechanics just would make for a better experience. And even then, they could even do something that isn't even that. They could go the full Final Fantasy, 16 approach, and they could just make it into an action game with RPG elements. I don't know what else to say about the possibilities of what they could do with this game, other than the sky's the limit with this thing. It's just about how far you're willing to go, how much you're willing to change up, and you're willing to, you're really willing to spice this thing up to make it into a fully realized and potentially more interesting experience than if it was just a remaster. It's I don't know.
Knowing a few people that have worked on the Star Wars. Firstly, perhaps
I just feel like that the idea of them being more hands-on, it's not something new, right? But it's always subject to question of how much are they going to shitification this thing? But I feel like that doesn't really make any sense as to why it's being stalled as much as it is, because they've always been hands-on with these projects to begin with. All right, Survivor has had this problem. Fallen Order probably had this problem even before Survivor. And then among a few other games. It's especially after the Battlefront 2 fiasco, Disney kind of needed to make sure that the companies were actually doing something good with the IP and not just creating garbage. They kind of had to put their foot down after Battlefront 2, and especially after how the movies inevitably ended up performing, among other things. It's just this is nothing new. Why is it taking so long? And again, Saber Interactive could have other projects in the background that require more time and precedence than the KOTOR remake, but that still doesn't explain all the hush-hush around it. What's going on here that it's basically just kind of, it's stuck in limbo.
For the first time in a very long time, given the failure of their partnership with Sony, given the size of Knights of the Old Republic and the expectation, they want to tackle this themselves, and maybe it's possibly Disney and or Lucasfilm that are taking up the mantle of publisher. Perhaps they are co-publishing with Saber and are focusing on the communicatory and marketing aspects of the game. Knowing a few people that have worked on the Star Wars license in the gaming industry recently, one of the biggest issues is the communication between Lucasfilm and the studios working on the games. And that doesn't mean the communication is bad. No, it just means that everything has to go through this extremely rigorous and laborious approval process that takes apparently ages, according to the people I've spoken.
I've heard about that too, but I've always heard that's been the case, especially after Star Wars Battlefront 2. Gee, I wonder why. But no, back in the day though, before Disney acquired it, even George Lucas himself was he never signed off on anything unless he specifically himself approved it. But getting George Lucas on board to see what you've been up to, it has never been that laborious of an issue. I mean, the most he did was probably delegate some of the things to other people, sure, but like he himself would have a personal stamp of approval on certain projects or every project really, because he was the owner of the franchise. He was the guy who made the goddamn thing. So okay, but we need to change up these and these sorts of details, right? I imagine that could be the case. I also imagine, right, that the main issue that people have with, like the main issue that this Lucasfilm has is that Lucasfilm Games, basically the reason why it's so laborious. Oh, sorry, my OBS disconnected. It is now reconnecting. Anyways, the reason why it could be so laborious, right, to get in contact with them is because, like, it has to go through a lot of checks and balances now because, like, there's not one de facto person that that answers to all of these different Star Wars projects. Now they have to go through a bunch of people. It's essentially, like, ruled by committee. And I don't think I need to be the person to explain why that's a fucking terrible ass idea.
Broken to. Every single little detail about something being developed needs to be approved by Lucasfilm, and this approval process can take weeks. So while there is a constant stream of communication between the two, it still takes a long time to get things done. It's very possible that to streamline this, maybe Saber are delegating it all to Lucasfilm so that they don't need to go through this rigorous approval process whenever they need to talk about anything in regard to the game, which, does sound like it could help move things a little bit quicker. But saying that, maybe that deal between Disney and...
I mean, that seems like a fairly accurate assessment, right? Like, you could have Lucasfilm Games basically handle the story and the lore-making process of the game and fine-tuning that to a certain level of degree, right? And you could just focus on making the game based around the scripts that they come up with. And even if they don't tackle it that way, like, that seems like a much less trifling of an approach to development, arguably. But I do feel like that in terms of what they come up with is also very... I mean, like, what can they really say or do if they decide that, hey, we need to change the way Bastila is depicted here, because like we can't have a woman act like a damsel, or have mood swings, or just be moody, or be uppity all the time. That doesn't make any sense. No. She needs to be she doesn't need to be like this stereotypical woman character. She needs to be a more stronger, more active presence in the story. And it's just like, okay, well, how do we do that? And it's just like, we already provided you with the script. Here it is. And it's literally just make her insufferable. And it's just like, this isn't going to work. I don't know what I see what you're trying to go for here, and I can already tell you it's not going to work. And they're just like, no. We're making this into a thing. You cannot question me on this. We have final say on what gets approved. It's just like, okay. I mean, I certainly don't want to be in a Aspire's situation, or even Saber's situation, like potential situation of like making a game for somebody else that's gonna bastardize the work, especially if it comes from the very company from which it's based from, like whose franchise it's based around. It's just like, ugh. And that wouldn't be unsurprising because Disney did, like, Lucasfilm and Disney did hire an entire writing staff consistent of a bunch of fucking weirdos who probably shouldn't be put in charge of a huge monolithic franchise like Star Wars. But from what I understand, that whole writers group has been slowly canned over a period of time. Like, you don't even hear people talk about it anymore.
Epic last year is an indication of a relationship developing there. I think at this point it's widely accepted that Sony might not be involved with the KOTOR remake anymore as the publisher, so that leaves the publisher's future up for speculation. And Epic are a very, very well-known publisher with a lot of money. Now yes, Saber are a very well-renowned and successful publisher themselves, so maybe they've decided, you know what, we don't need anyone to help us, we're going to do this alone. However, in the eyes of some, Epic would be a very, very good choice of support if they did need a publisher. And Saber have worked with Epic before, so maybe there's something there to consider. Now, we do know that a couple years ago at Star Wars Celebration, Lucasfilm did reveal that the Old Republic era was part of their upcoming slate of storytelling timelines for the first time ever. And
as far as that Epic comment is concerned, I don't know much about companies that work with Epic. I just know that they try to outdo Steam in terms of, well, having in terms of basically having like monopoly on like gaming culture, as well as just having a storefront for video games in general. I know Epic's been kind of competing on that front, and they've been failing consistently. You can't compete with Steam at this point. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's too entrenched. And until Gabe Newell leaves and somebody else gets put in charge, they're not subject to ever seem to have that point change or shift in any sort of meaningful degree until they start fucking it up themselves. And then that gives people the opportunity to actually tackle Steam in a different, more new and innovative ways. But that's neither here or there. In terms of this Epic, the idea of them like working with Epic to publish the game, I feel like I don't know, that could work, but again, it really depends on what Epic decides as well needs to be done to make the game work. And I feel like that the first thing they're going to want to do is immediately just like, we want you to use Unreal Engine 5 or 6 or whatever the fuck, right? We need this game to be a showcase on why Unreal Engine is the best engine for video games and that developers should be using it more often. And so you can probably imagine, right, that Epic is going to be demanding that they make this game look pretty as fuck at the sacrifice of gameplay. And I don't know if I care about that. I don't know if I care about that so much. Make Knights of the Old Republic come back, make it look pretty as fuck, sure, but do not sacrifice gameplay. The game is already rudimentary and light on gameplay as is. We don't need this thing to be even lighter, to be fair.
Admittedly, Knights of the Old Republic remake would probably be the best way to introduce people to this era, rather than making some... Admittedly, Knights of the Old Republic remake would probably... At Star Wars Celebration, Lucasfilm did reveal that the Old Republic era was part of their upcoming slate of storytelling timelines for the first time ever. And admittedly, Knights of the Old Republic remake would probably be the best way to introduce people to this era, rather than making some books or comics or a really crappy TV show that, let's be honest, will never be able to capture the essence of the games. So
he immediately started thinking of the power of one, the power of two, the power of many when he made that comment. I feel it. I can feel it in the way that he delivered that. It's just like he immediately started thinking of that fucking meme of a fucking show. Why did that exist? Why did they make that fucking thing? And of course they had a fucking... It's made by a person, by the way, who honestly should not have been in charge of making anything. And to be fair on Disney's part, this was a decision that was made a long fucking time ago, but they should not have given that person any sort of leeway to make Star Wars content. I don't know what the fuck they were you know what? That's right. I know exactly what the fuck they were thinking. They were thinking Star Wars was so big, it's such a big franchise, it's such a big thing. It doesn't matter what we do with it. It's going to print money. And it's going to print gold. It's just like, all right, we need to preface this, okay? the whole thing that happened around that Star Wars TV show, the one that shall not be named, what the fuck was it even called anymore? The problem with that show, okay, was that it was conceived at a time, and it was okayed at a time when, you know, like Disney just acquired the license and they were just starting to get in the swing of making the movies, and they had already like greenlit like several like tie-in properties among other things, right? Like I believe it was after The Last Jedi that they had officially announced this fucking thing. And so they were basically like you know, they were at the peak, the pinnacle of what they could do with the franchise. And they fucking bungled it after The Last Jedi. They didn't take the criticisms too seriously, but when they saw the diminishing returns after the third film, on top of the fact that they've been trying to play catch up ever since, you know, like they started taking the Star Wars IP a little more seriously. And so naturally, right? They could just tell this person, likely due to contractual reasons, to just fuck off, right? No. They had to greenlit this thing. They had to allow her to make this thing. And they eventually okayed it, and they just hoped that people would just not notice or even care that it even existed. And that if it did manage to gain some level of success, what do you fucking do, right? I'm pretty fucking sure that abomination of a TV show just happened. Star Wars Acolyte should just, I don't know. I've only seen the combat scenes, and I can tell you just by watching the action scenes that thing looks like ass. It just looks like ass. I don't know about the actors in particular. I feel like the actors were pretty much squandered. I feel like the story and the narrative itself is the part that was the biggest issue with it. That didn't make a whole lot of sense. I know in particular the Asian actor who played as the master I believe the main character of that TV show. He seemed the most passionate about it because he actually bothered to not only watch the movies and research what Star Wars even is, but he also tried to emulate Qui-Gon Jinn, which, I mean, I approve that 100%, 1000%. We need more Qui-Gon Jinns in the Star Wars franchise. But yeah, I don't know. It's a bit weird. It's a weird package, the Acolyte, and it's not even like interesting in any fashion. It's just like, what is it? It's like an odd tasting morsel that you just don't know how to quantify. It's got a weird texture. It's got a weird texture to it. Its taste is very tangy. You don't even know what the fuck it tastes like half the time. You're just sitting there chewing on this thing. You're just like, this thing's got such a bizarre texture, right? It's like you're tasting something that's a mixture of like you're crunching on something that's like a mixture of gristle and gummy, and you're not too sure what the fuck to make of it. It tastes so fucking bizarre, you can't even put your fucking mind to it. It's just like, this analogy is kind of weird, but anyways, it's the Acolyte. It was truly something. But yeah, no, as far as turning this thing into a TV show, that could work, except for the fact that it's a game. So people are just going to be like, well, why not make it into a game?
Or comics, or a really crappy TV show that, let's be honest, will never be able to capture the essence of the games. So maybe Lucasfilm truly are waiting for this remake to unveil themselves as one of their stepping stones into a new era of Star Wars, and they want to be the ones to talk about it first as a publisher or a co-publisher. But it is admittedly a little bit strange. And secondly, maybe it's just a bit of an information standoff. Knights of the Old Republic remake has been somewhat of an information void over the past few years. It's like nobody from nowhere is allowed to speak about the game, otherwise their family are going to be hung, drawn and quartered. Embracer refused to talk about it. Lucasfilm refused to talk about it. Disney refused to talk about it. Saber now refused to talk about it. And hey, they say no news is good news, but maybe Saber are just like, you know what? We're going to make the game, but we're not taking the flak. You guys deal with any kind of marketing or public relations regarding this game. But at the same time, that's not a particularly healthy relationship if this is the case. And I can't imagine Saber actively choosing to take the KOTOR remake with them after their split from Embracer, while having a very negative relationship with Lucasfilm at the same time. But hey ho, this is all speculation at this point, right? TLDR, they're still working on it. Apparently,
I mean, I imagine that the other likelihood is that they don't have any real way to make the remake. And even then, despite the fact that they're in charge of making it, they probably don't have any real initiative to want to do it either. I wouldn't be surprised, right, if the people in charge and the creative, the developers working to make these games just aren't that inspired to make a Star Wars remake. And so despite the fact that they got the license to handle it, they're not interested in doing it. And so the publishers, the developers, all of these things, right, and the people and even Lucasfilm, right, when they look at the conversation and the process around this game being developed, I think the other likely possible scenario is that they realize that this game isn't going to get made, and it's not going to get made anytime soon, and they're clearly not interested in wanting to do it, so might as well just let this thing just kind of fall by the wayside and eventually die like a bad memory, right? I wouldn't be surprised, right? I would not be surprised if that's what ends up happening. It's a miracle into itself that games get developed at all, but it's an even greater miracle that they even get made. And one of the interesting, takeaways of this is that it basically got announced. It's everything people could ever want to happen for the Star Wars IP, and especially for a game series, right? Not just for the franchise, but as a game series, it's only had 2 entries, and it's basically some of the best games ever made. You have to imagine, right, that there is a lot of vested interests in making this game work, and the people in charge are not at all interested in making it work. And so they don't want to be fucked by forcing the studio to make a game that they don't even want to make, and then have it turn out to be absolute dog shit. And they don't want to be fucked by getting too hands-on with it, potentially fucking something up with the game, and then, a lot of people give Lucasfilm and Lucasfilm Games flack for the reasons that are obvious. It's clear to me, right, that they need to have people who are genuinely inspired and are, capable and are able to make the goddamn thing, and not necessarily, just uninterested and don't even really want to deal with it in the first place. It's like, I feel like they had a potential for it with Aspyr, but I feel like, right, so, now that Sony kind of canned that, and now that Saber's in charge of it, the possibilities of what could be going on behind the scenes with this KOTOR remake is just, it's a little too up in the air. I feel like the silence for the longest period of time was honestly warranted. I feel like it's necessary, right? Because there was the showcase trailer came out, everyone got into a big old hubbub over it. People were excited, and then when the game inevitably changed hands from Aspyr, people were kind of concerned about what the fuck was going to happen with it. And despite the fact that it got changed over to Saber, it made logical sense that they didn't probably want to talk about it initially, because they were probably just figuring out what to even do with the thing now that they had it. And if they are working on it, right? If they are working on this thing, actually, and it's currently in development, I think it makes sense, right, that you don't want to talk about it too much without actually having something to talk about, right? You know, like No Man's Sky understood this lesson after a time. You know, it's just like you can't talk about the game and potentially say something that's going to get you fucking fucked over, both PR wise and literally, not just figuratively. And so it made sense that they wanted to just kind of, you know, be quiet around the subject for a time. But I feel like now it's not really so much of an excuse because it's like it's been a long time. We haven't heard anything in fucking forever. You know, like we need to know that this game is actually still being worked on and is actually currently still alive. So even just something as simple, right? Just something as simple as just like another trailer would help to reinvigorate some interest in the Knights of the Old Republic remake. And even if it's just like a basic ass CG trailer, right? Not necessarily as basic as like, oh, just Revan in the dark, shadowy mist of an area, and then he just ignites his lightsaber, and oh, there he is. No. It's something a bit more cinematic looking, right? Just like maybe starfighter shooting, you know, like it's showing off some of the locales and places you can travel to in the game. You know, like just something basic, right? With like someone narrating the story and the subject matter of the game itself. You know, like it's. I feel like if they really wanted to get people like invested into the remake now, they need to basically jumpstart this thing. It's because it's currently on life support and it's kind of like, you know, like the heart rate is stopping. They need to put a fucking defibrillator in this thing before it fucking dies literally in the public consciousness. Anyways, but yeah.
And now they're waiting for Disney Lucasfilm to be the ones to talk about it. Maybe they'll mention something at Star Wars Celebration, but I wouldn't bet on it. And it's probably just going to be another year of absolutely naff all until they say next year we're still working on it. But who knows, guys? Maybe 2025 will be our year. It's not like we've been saying that for like 4 at this point, but you know. Anyway, that is enough from me. What do you think about this information? Do you think it's better that Lucasfilm might be taking on the marketing of the game and are hopeful they'll talk about it soon? Or do you think the game is still kind of dead?
Oh, they must have just had it. Oh no, wait. 2 weeks ago? Oh, did they just have Star Wars Celebration? What the fuck? Hayden Christensen showed up. Starfighter. Oh, so they announced Star Wars Starfighter at the Celebration. Anything else got announced? New Star Wars movie shows and announced at Celebration. Ryan Gosling and Sean Levy, Star Wars Celebration. Okay. Stan Witwer and Athena Portfolio. Or Athena Portillo. Oh, this got announced there too? I thought they kind of capped that Old Republic story. Doesn't look like anything else other than that announcement. Oh, and a Pirate's Fortune DLC, I guess, for fucking Star Wars Outlaws. Alright, whatever. Man. Yeah, Star Wars is dead. It's very dead. It's disappointing. There's only one announcement for a game, and it's Star Wars Starfighter. I'm not sure what to make of that. They already have Star Wars Squadron, and I'm not sure how to feel about that either. Yeah. I have it. I just haven't played it, and I hear it's pretty bare bones of a game. It has a campaign and some multiplayer stuff, but that's about it. I don't know. clearly they did not talk about the game at their Star Wars celebration, so that's a little disappointing. Aye. Otherwise, we'd be seeing the internet completely abuzz of it, so. Well, other than that. Yeah, so what game should we play today? It's been a while in the making. I have no idea. Because the Dark Forces remaster was actually pretty good, but we could also play something else. I'm thinking I don't want to spend more money for Jedi Survivor because I already have it on my main account. I would rather play something I haven't played on that channel as well, but I can't play Republic Commando for the reasons I've already explained. I guess it could play The Force Unleashed. I don't know. I feel like it's not as entertaining of a watch, though. Dark Forces has fun gameplay, but it's also kind of light on story. It's a good remaster. It's a good remake, though. I mean, it is a remaster. But it's like they basically had to remake this thing from the ground up. They basically redraw everything for the cinematic cutscenes. Star Wars Battlefront 2. You know, Battlefront Classic Edition was also made by Aspyr, but I don't know what happened with that game. I'm sure I mentioned it before, but this game, the Battlefront Classic Edition, got... I don't know what the fuck happened to that fucking thing. That thing was literally, like, it's a buggy mess. It got released in a fucking poor-ass way. I don't know what the fuck happened to that thing. It's a good thing we still have the classic games, just by themselves. But it's so weird. Like, like, Aspyr had such a good track record. What the fuck happened? God, who knows? Yeah, it's a really piss poor time to be a Star Wars fan because you don't have anything to really be excited about, right? Like these days. Like there were things to look forward to, but now they're kind of very few and in between, and the stuff that we are getting just isn't that great. Like even TV show wise, it's just there's nothing good, and like extended universe stuff just isn't there. There's just nothing tie-in related, nothing good is coming out of Star Wars as of right now, and even all of the like lore related things is all subject to change for better or worse. It's not looking good. It just isn't looking good these days. Imagine how the fucking actual Star Wars channels must be feeling. They're having to scrape they have to scrape the bottom of the barrel to find something interesting to talk about these days. Let's see. New Battlefront game is insane. Oh yeah. There is somebody making a new Battlefront game. It's like a mod for like a different game, I think. It's basically like a remake of the Battlefront games. And it looks interesting. It's first person and everything. It looks kind of cool, but... Shadow Lore 2026 official trailer? Oh, it leaked. Never mind. It's probably not true. It's probably some bullshit-ass thing. Grand Collection? Available now? Agree to disagree? You know, that seems interesting. What does Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen have to say about anything? they're answering fan questions. Is that what I'm
Do you
getting?
think you've got the most dedicated fan base?
Feels that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does this have to pop up every time?
The Star Trek fans might have something to say about that, but no.
And Marvel as well, of course.
Yeah, well.
This can get competitive quickly, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just see how dark the dark side you're on.
think we're-
You never know with you how deeply into the dark side you are.
Yeah, that's true.
It's amazing how much these people have not fucking aged since the movies. I mean, Ewan looks like he's getting up in years a little bit, but Hayden looks the same as he always did in the movie. Like, like even like during the movies, like this man has not aged at all. This man's a fucking vampire.
Shall we?
Red is the coolest color of lightsaber. 3, 2, 1.
Well, there you are.
Yeah. I mean, I could be both sides of this line, in truth.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I was always blue.
You were always blue.
Samuel Jackson was purple.
Obviously purple, yeah.
And that was like something that he said, I'll play the role if I can have a purple lightsaber.
That's something he just decided himself. He's just like, hey, is there a purple lightsaber? Just walked up to George, was like, is there a purple lightsaber? Can't the lightsaber be purple? And he's just like, I'll think about it. And then he went and fucking did it. It was the funniest thing. That was the best part about that time and era of Star Wars. Is like, George Lucas did not give a fuck. Like, he's just like, yeah, we can, as long as I'm telling my story, we can basically do whatever the fuck everybody else wants to do. It's just like, you want a purple lightsaber? I'll give you a fucking purple lightsaber. You want to do this? And I'll do this. It's like, it is, at the time, he just did not give the slightest fuck. But, except for like storytelling and other, usual conventions. But it's like, nowadays, like after the movies and even nowadays, it's just like, it probably changed his mind a little bit on certain things. But it's just like, he definitely tried to have a more stringent, more established story and lore for this franchise. But, like, God. I miss George Lucas era Star Wars. God, I miss those days.
That's what he told George.
And he got
That's
it.
why hasn't he got it? I mean, you're not going to say no to Samuel Jackson anyway.
We went through a nice collection of sabers.
Yeah. The lightsabers that we used back in the prequels were literally like there was a certain kind of alloy. I don't know. It was a metal pole.
Yeah.
And they would bend. Like we would fight, and every take we did in a fight, they would bend. Because it's like full contact when you're.
We're really having a go at each other, and
yeah.
They would be all warped at the end of it, and they'd replace you with a new saber. And
there was that guy on set who just had a car on wheels.
Yeah. Thomas. Yeah, Thomas.
That's right.
Yeah.
And all he did was make lightsabers, and every take we'd be handed a new one. And nowadays they're different. They're different now. I sort of missed the old ones, to be honest.
They had a nice feel to them.
Yeah.
I wonder what they use now for the movies that they were working on, and hell, even for some of the TV shows. Like, is it the same flimsy crap, or is it like something else? I feel like, right, we have the technology and the resources to be able to have more reliable type of like prop sabers, but I don't know. It's kind of funny to think about that, because I have seen like the behind the scenes look of the movies, and it's kind of funny to see, Hayden and co kind of like flinging around like these weird sort of like bars with like saber hilts attached to them, and they're not even like fully detailed. They're just these sort of like garbo type of like hilts. Like they're only there to be serviceable, and they're not meant to be looked at a closer angle, type of thing.
Yeah, they were real clash together. Yeah, I know. It's the good old days. Lightsabers aren't where they used to be.
Darth Vader is the best villain in movie history. 3, 2, 1.
Played.
Yeah. I can't think of anyone else who's more a villain than him.
I mean, he definitely had a fucking strong presence in films, especially at the time it came out. I feel like it's kind of hard to really imagine a villain that's more iconic than Darth Vader. I mean, there's been many movies since Star Wars, and the first thing you think of like what's a pretty iconic villain, right? You ask yourself, what's a pretty iconic villain that you still know of, that you still think about, at least to some degree, right, to this day? Darth fucking Vader. Like, even if you're not a fan of Star Wars, you still know who Darth Vader is, which that tells you all that you really need to know about how much of a fucking show stealer Darth Vader actually was in the original trilogy.
Strongly agree.
Very scary to see him, you know. I didn't work with Darth Vader in episode 1 to 3 because he wasn't, you weren't him yet. But then in this series that we've just made, to see you coming at me with that, it's like made me feel like I was 7 years old again. Like the fear that went through me was genuine. I've never had that acting before, where you have a actual fear moment, you know. But I felt that when I turned around and there you were,
Yeah.
with like 7 feet tall with the helmet. And
It had been 17, 18 years since I last put it on. And
Yeah, I believe he put it on specifically for Revenge of the Sith. I believe the actor who played in the original movies was somebody else, but I think it was a black guy. I know that the voice actor for Darth Vader in the original films was a black guy. He's no longer with us, but he definitely made Darth Vader come to life, that's for sure. As far as who played him, I'm not too sure who actually put on the cape and the helmet. I'm not too sure who that is, but it definitely wasn't Hayden at the time. I don't think. I'm pretty sure it wasn't. God, but as far as in fact, who is the voice actor for Darth Vader nowadays? Or could they just use... I mean, they've used AI to replicate Tarkin. They could probably use AI to replicate Darth Vader's voice if they need to. Some people have already done that with the Outlaws cinematic cutscene with Darth Vader in it, but which is honestly a major improvement from the actual voice actor that they got from. I'm not gonna fucking lie, but it's... I feel like anyone trying to take on the mantle of playing Darth Vader, they have their work cut out for them. It's very much a presence that's hard to match.
What an experience! I mean, it's an incredible costume.
yeah.
Do you feel evil in it?
You can't help not, but I mean, it really informs the way you feel. Yeah, you do.
Motorbikes are the best form of travel. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going with agree because I don't really ride motorbikes, but I love dirt bikes.
Yeah.
The first time I was on a bike was actually with you. I don't know if you remember, but when
In Sydney.
Actually here in London.
Oh.
Yeah. When we first got to London to do some of
Wait, he's never actually rode a bike before? Is that what I'm hearing right now? I'm so busy in thought, and I'm hearing something about what do you say, motorbikes? What?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going with agree because I don't really ride motorbikes, but I love dirt bikes.
Yeah.
The first time I was on a bike was actually with you. I don't know if you remember, but when
In Sydney.
Actually here in London.
Oh.
Yeah. When we first got to London to do some of the additional photography.
Yeah.
You came and picked me up at the hotel and went for a ride on your bike. And,
Oh yeah.
You were fast. I was holding on for dear life.
I love.
That's a fucking image, and I have to think about fucking Anakin Skywalker and fucking Obi-Wan on a motorbike just zooming and cruising down fucking London. That must be a sight to even behold, so much as to think of that. Just the mental image of it is just kind of crazy.
Love it.
It was amazing.
Yeah. So my dad was there was a charity organization in my little town of Crieff, and my dad was the chairman of this charity organization one year. Kids would write in, and this little kid wanted to ride a motorbike. So my dad organized for his friend to bring a little 50cc motorbike, like one of those tiny little Honda ones, to a field. And this little kid got to ride around. And I was there. And after this kid rode around, my dad said, "Do you want a go?" And I went, "Okay." So I got on this motorbike, and it was tiny, and I was quite tiny. And it was just a twist and go, no gears. And I took off on it, and I like, my life changed. You know, I couldn't believe that this turned into this. And I still feel a bit like that today. Like when I get on a bike and I ride somewhere, I still feel like, are they really letting me do this? Like, are we allowed? It's so good it should be illegal or something. You know, you have that feeling. So I've never gotten over it, and that's still my favorite way to get around.
I love it.
The prequels were underrated. 3, 2,
Especially that question hits a lot different nowadays. I wonder what they're gonna say. Oh my god, I already know my answer. From strongly disagree to strongly agree, I'd say the prequels are definitely underrated, especially with what we have now. So I would say agree. I wonder what they're gonna say though.
1.
I mean,
Strongly disagree.
Not by the people that love that. Sort of we made them for, in fact.
Yeah, underrated at the time.
At the time.
Yeah.
And by the critics and stuff.
I feel
at
like
the
now,
time, yeah.
though, just needed a little bit of time, you know, to sort of ferment in our popular culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think they were appreciated at the time by the generation we made them for, if you like. It's just that there was no social media then. There was no we didn't hear their voice as much as you would do nowadays. You know, with a.
He's got a point. You know, like back when those movies came out, you know, like the internet was still very much in its infancy, not just outright non-existence. But you know, like, yeah, I do know that the prequel films were made for a younger generation, but despite the fact that most kids, you know, like care, you know, like they did appreciate the movies, a lot of the fans and the critics did not care for the films. I know at the time it was still poorly you know, it was still poorly received. I didn't mind it. I didn't care for the movies, like the story of the movies either. I mean, because for a kids slotted films, right? For films that were made specifically to bring on a newer generation, while also tying into the actual story of like the original one, right? You want it to be full of action and kind of light on story, if we're going to be honest, but I don't think George Lucas got the memo, because the first episode was just literally politics. It was just all politics. It was all setting up the story to get to the lightsaber fights. It was that's pretty much what it was. And the action was very light. There was it was mostly just blaster deflection among other things. Very little on the actual action, on the actiony bits. God, those were some films, man. I think episode 1 was very much designed to establish the narrative of the story, as well as Anakin's eventual downfall. More so, it was more focused on doing that than it was actually trying to be entertaining. And I think that's kind of like the biggest problem with the prequels as a whole, is that they kind of have to. I feel like the prequels from there on out then had to kind of like supplement a lot of scenes with like some action elements here and there to make it really stand out. Which I feel like they definitely did that with episode 2 and 3, but that also made it lighter on some of the more narrative bits. I feel like there's definitely a drawback when it comes to like when you need to take a break from the narrative elements to when you need to, you know, like go back to reintroduce them, because I feel like it made the narrative of, you know, like the actual story for Darth Vader that much more of a difficult one to follow, because it's not nearly as fleshed out. Like, I feel like if the Clone Wars started on episode 1, that would have easily have, you know, like they could have easily have made the story focused around specifically the Clone Wars, and that would have just been that, right? I feel like Qui-Gon Jinn, like, could have been introduced around the time of the Clone Wars as well. it would have definitely like it would have helped to expedite the process of getting to the Clone Wars on top of just like actually establishing like the current situation and the storyline that the story is going to go into, as well as just like like among other things. But it's I don't know, I'm just kind of spitballing at this point. But yeah, it's the prequels, man. They're such an odd package, but it's an odd package that it's by today's standards, it's not nearly so bad. Like, I feel like it's not nearly as much of an odd duck as it was when it came out, especially not after the Star Wars movies we got from the sequel trilogy. It's very much like a much more respected package than it is than it was back then. Hell, we've even had some weird TV shows and stories we're still getting today that are still not even prequel level fucking storytelling. It's like a lot of it's just garbage, or they're just taking weird storytelling conventions or directions with certain settings and media that just doesn't make any sense, right? I don't know. I feel like that's the conversation around the prequels has definitely softened over the years, but I also still feel like there are some criticisms to be had. I mean, I'm not the kind of person who's like so in love with the prequels that I think that they're completely underappreciated and that they're just they're truly like faultless classics. I think even the original trilogy has its problems, but like the prequel trilogy is certainly the one with the biggest faults. Because when it has highs, it has highs, but when it's slow, you really feel the slowness. Like it comes in waves with the prequels, whereas the original trilogy just feels like a slow burn all the way through. Because like the writing's more consistent, the storytelling's more consistent, the world building's more consistent, everything's more consistent with the original trilogy compared to the prequels. Which is why I think a lot of people have such a vastly different reception for it. Anyways, but yeah, prequels was truly an interesting an interesting saga at the time. God, I wish they would just go back. I wish they would just go back to the stuff that works. I really wish they do. I would even settle for like prequel level type of writing at this point. I just want some better Star Wars, to be honest. I just want any Star Wars that's better than the Star Wars we're getting right now, because God, what the fuck is going on?
Film that's coming out now, there's no question what people think about it, because you can see it on social media, and the audience's voice is much louder now, if you like. And at the time,
oh God, that's true.
The reaction was driven by the critics who decided they weren't as good as the original film, and George always had he always had a very strong idea to make them different kinds of movies. He didn't set out to remake what he'd done in the 70s. He wanted to try to tell to set those films up, if you like, but also to make them feel different, which they do.
The Star Wars universe.
He definitely achieved that. They are definitely different from the original trilogy. It's politically heavy. It's dramatic. It's dramatically heavy. It's even dark in certain instances. Like George really took a mile on the prequel trilogy. I mean, again, the mileage may vary for a lot of people, but God damn it, I cannot knock George for trying to do something different with the prequel trilogy. Like, again, I am a strong advocate of people basically doing whatever the fuck they want with their own IP. But I mean, I will absolutely... I don't think it's necessarily an excuse from criticism, but I do think that it's... I think that trying something new, doing something new, wanting to actually try to reinvent the wheel, I feel like these are all understandable and I think these are all very sensible things to want to do, right? As someone who, has a... if you're a creative person and you're a creator, you're someone who just wants to try to, entertain and constantly keep your audience engaged, you want to do something different. Right? And you want to do something new, something better, potentially. I totally get it. it kind of sucks that he kind of gave up though after the prequel trilogy though, because like the prequel trilogy really fucking took the wind out of his sails. Like he had plans for more trilogies of movies even, but he ultimately decided not to because the reception of the prequels were so fucking vapid that he just didn't want to do it anymore. Like it really did take the wind out of his sails, and he just kind of left the content creation of his franchise be dealt with third parties, and he just had final say over decisions on what gets made and what doesn't. And it's just, that's kind of a sad position to be in, I imagine. But granted, George definitely still handled the franchise even then a lot better than fucking Disney's doing right now. Christ. I mean, he had people who at least understood and appreciated the franchise and what it stood for, like around him and in his circles, and that helped to alleviate and help to better make the franchise into what it is now, whereas today it's kind of just like all over the place.
Is the best cinematic universe. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah. I think it's a testament that we love that there's so many different stories being told within it now, because we like that world. George created something that we can escape into, and I think that's...
Yeah, that's true. It's a franchise that you could easily you can dip into, and you could tell any type of story in it if you wanted to. George focused more so on family and drama, as well as darker, a darker heritage, and also a fallen hero, a tragedy. He's focused on, his contributions have been very singularly focused on family, but a lot of people have came in and they saw some of the elements of Star Wars and I thought, I could turn this into something else. Or I could do something similar like this, but a tad different. Right? Especially in video games, they very much focused on on the storytelling aspects, on trying to tell a more unique and more sort of a story. I would say not a more narratively heavy story than really anything else. But it's it's a really interesting franchise because you really could tell any story in the Star Wars universe if you wanted to. And it's because it's just fleshed out enough, and its universe makes just the right amount of sense, right? That you could feasibly tell any type of story in it without having to think too hard on how this could actually exist, because everything has a purpose in the movies, which tells you a lot about the amount of detail that George went into to make every scene feel like there's purpose in the things that are going on in those scenes, right? George and Spielberg really did do a lot to make these movies and to make this franchise as elevated as it is. The groundwork was all there, and they just had to set it, and they just set it up. The movies basically walked so that the expanded universe can run, basically.
That's why people love it so much. I mean, there's lots of reasons why people love it, I think. But the fact that we can tell different stories from different timelines with characters from the original trilogy or not,
And that's really been so fun to watch it just continue to grow and expand. And I love it.
Yeah, me too. I love it. Yeah.
Do you think you've got the most dedicated fan base?
Feels that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Star Trek fans might have something to say about that, but
We'll ignite a war.
Yeah. People beating each other up in cinema queues around the world.
And Marvel as well, of course.
Yeah, well.
You was just yeah, no. I feel like Star Trek fans. I feel like Star Trek. You go into Star Trek looking for something completely different compared to fucking Star Wars. I feel like Star Trek is a more educated man's game, whereas Star Wars is this is an E for everyone type of thing. It's Star Trek is very much for I feel is more for a more mature, sophisticated audience type of people, that appreciates like science fiction to a more subtler degree, whereas Star Wars is just like in your face. I got shit happening here and there. I got random like tidbits about technological advancements, different worlds and places with all these different types of things going on. People are hitting each other in the faces with laser swords. Like it's the fucking works. Like George really did kind of like George and Spielberg really did just kind of like go above and beyond just trying to make this thing into a science fiction story to like being a full-on just like we are using the science fiction to create some of the most cinematically like aesthetically appealing shit you could possibly imagine. And what's fucking cooler than trying to murder someone with with like multicolored laser swords? You gotta ask yourself this question. Especially as a kid at the time, it's just like, oh my god, that's fucking epic as shit. Well, yeah, no, I don't know. As far as Marvel's concerned, I don't think Marvel fans are even fans. I feel like Marvel fans are just fans to a certain point and degree. I feel like they're the most casual of fan audiences, because Marvel is as big as Marvel was when the movies were coming out. The stuff that's coming out now, and also the investment in Marvel now is just it's pittance. It's very pittance, and it's very dry. Like fucking after Endgame and Infinity War, it's like you get there's nothing. There's nothing. They've seen everything they need to see. They don't need to see any of this other shit, right? Disney needs to focus on a different type of storyline now that the whole Infinity War saga is over. They need to focus on something else. They probably need to focus on Galactus or something new, but like they need to capture that same magic again, but they're not going to be able to do that if they're, churning out these really mediocre fucking like TV shows and works. And I don't know why they're doing that. I feel like, especially with what they've been doing to Star Wars, you would think they would learn from these mistakes and try not to do what they're doing to Star Wars to Marvel, which is their biggest franchise, and at least at the current juncture, it's their bread and butter. And they had it going for a good while, and they're squandering that now. Nothing makes sense. I don't understand that. Disney is a company that consistently has never made sense since Marvel took off. I don't understand half the shit that's going on anymore.
Pineapple on pizza is delicious. 3, 2, 1.
What a fucking question.
It depends.
You see that? That right there just decided the entire fate of the next Star Wars project right there. Pineapple on pizza. Oh, God. But no, that's a very random question. I got nothing else to say on that.
I feel like pineapple with I've had pineapple with jalapeno on the pizza.
Okay.
And it's a great combination.
Oh, okay.
It was actually Jet, George's son, that told me about, you gotta put some jalapeno with the pineapple.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what would you just have the pineapple?
Jalapeno with the pineapple? I guess it's better, right? Because it's blending the flavor with something else, right? That makes it complementary. I can see that being a reasonable take for pineapple on fucking pizza. But I will never understand, right? I could understand pineapple on pizza. I could understand, right? I could maybe understand wanting to dip your pizza in ranch. Anchovies, I will never understand. God help you if you put pineapples, anchovies, and you dip your pizza in fucking ranch dressing type of people. I imagine someone who does all three. It's one thing to have a preference for one or the other, but it's like all three of it, you must be a monster. You must be truly an alien of this world, because you cannot tell me you like pineapple anchovies, and ranch on pizza. That shit just seems mental to me. You must have a mental illness if you like all three of these things. Oh my god. I think I know of at least one VTuber who actually likes that sort of thing. And granted, I don't know if they like all of those things, but I do know of one VTuber who's talked about liking at least a couple of those things, and that's already borderline sus as is. But I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, moving on. God.
On his own?
When I was young, yeah.
Really?
I grew up in Canada.
Listen, don't blame the Canadians for your own strange tastes, you know? I don't know. I would.
I did not know Hayden was
I don't
Canadian.
think I've ever ordered.
I'll make you pizza one time,
Okay.
and you'll be on this side soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to pull me over to
Yeah.
the
We're gonna pull you over to the agree side.
agree side. My favorite pizza is pepperoni with
Come to the agree side if we have no Mondays.
anchovies.
Oh.
Because I just must have a real salty taste, you know? But I don't know that I've ever ordered a pizza with pineapple. Of course, I've picked a slice up from somewhere that's got pineapple on it, but it's not something that I would ever think to order.
Obi-Wan's Jedi mullet is the worst hairstyle in cinema history. 3, 2, 1.
Hold on, what? Jedi mullet is the worst hairstyle in cinema history? Since mullet? Since when did Ewan McGregor have a mullet? Are you telling me that his hairstyle in the prequels is a mullet? That's a mullet? I thought a mullet was like the slick back look with shaved sideburns and everything. I thought that was a fucking mullet. Are you telling me there's a different type of mullet that I'm just not aware of? What the fuck am I hearing?
Style in cinema history. 3, 2, 1.
No. Strongly
We
disagree
can't.
on that.
Oh, wait, are they talking about when he was a Padawan? I thought that was pretty clean. I don't know what they're talking about. It's got to be what they're referring to.
Oh, yeah. No. No, you rock that mullet very well.
Episode 2 Obi-Wan. Okay, that makes sense. I did not know. Whenever people talk about mullets, I think of like I said before, the slicked back and shaved sides type of mullet. Like, I don't think of this.
At the time, probably I didn't think it was I might have gone over here. But now, no, I think it's like part of the way it is.
It's iconic, yeah.
It's an iconic mullet.
Yeah, it is.
It's quite a mullet, though, isn't it, really? It's very Bee Gees. I think it's a sort of Bee Gees haircut more than anything. Bee Gee Jedi.
Did you like the little... Was it the plait that you had coming
Yeah.
down for another one?
The Padawan braid, yeah. I did like that.
Me too.
But mainly because you made it look so cool in episode 1. I was like, oh, I get one of those now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's an interesting idea, isn't it?
it is. I've met people
Who have one.
who have their own Padawan braid because of that, yeah.
And also, what's forgotten is that you have the
The thing on the
the
back,
thing on
too,
the back
yeah.
as well, which
And-
so that's
and you
often
had-
forgotten about.
You had to grow your hair so that they could attach it, and the rest of it was very short. So if you weren't filming, your hair looked very odd
Yeah,
because you had a
just
long
one-
bit right here and a
Yeah.
long bit right here, and everything else was very short.
Yeah, I remember that first thing in the morning, but just having it sort of glued in.
Yeah,
You know.
I kept a couple of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's funny is that you see them up for auction every now and again. Somebody sells one, and
Oh, yeah.
like there was only one. Like there was a new one every day. It wasn't the same one. People are selling them like the Jedi braid. You're like, no.
It's great to be working again with the person
I can't imagine actually having your hair grow out to be put into a braid, let alone gluing one on your fucking head every single day you wake up in the morning. Can you imagine? I also can't imagine that as like a fucking style you would actually be proud to walk around with. Like, unless you came out of a Star Wars convention, that just seems kind of fucking weird. Like, I'm not gonna lie, that's a little weird. Though, granted, I feel like that Padawan braids were an interesting concept because, you know, like, how do you determine what the rank of a Jedi is depending on their stage in life when it comes to their learning and progression as being a Jedi in the service of the Order. Well, having them wear robes is one thing. Having them sit on a council is another thing, but when everybody looks the same, well, you have to differentiate between the masters and the students. Well, the students wear braids, and they're often younger and have shorter hair, whereas the more experienced masters either are just bald, they're old, or they just have longer hair. You know, like, I feel like that kind of makes sense to a degree, right? It kind of helped to establish like who were the masters from the apprentices. But yeah, I feel like Anakin's choice of attire too, you know, like was always a weird question, because, you know, like a lot of people are always wondering, well, why does he always wear black in the films? Like everybody else wears like traditional robes, but Anakin's always wearing like some weird leathery black type of robing. And that was an artistic aesthetic choice by George Lucas to help establish like the direction that Anakin was going to go down the road of later. But they narratively had explained it away later on as like Anakin choosing to rebel against the council in his own sort of slightly unique and subtle ways, because he got tired, because he's Anakin, he's tired of the council's fucking bullshit. Constantly, he's always being held back. He's always being told what and what not to do. Like the council's always been hampering him and has always been on his ass for just about everything. And so any digs that he can make in the council's direction, like he very much feels very justified in doing so. Like he chose those robes specifically because it not only helped to make him be different from, to be like, look at me, I'm different than the rest of you type of mentality. Like I'm the radical, I'm the odd one out. No. He didn't just do it that way. He also did it just to firmly establish that very fact as well. He also did it because it not only made him look, it not only made him figuratively different mentally from he didn't also establish it his ideological differences with the council. He also did it as a literal to establish his literal difference in terms of as a Jedi with the council, because the Order treats him like he's a black sheep. And so he just literally embraced that and took it literally. And so he started wearing leather black robes to kind of reflect that aspect of his relationship with the Jedi Order. It's just like, I am a rebel. I am the black sheep. I am the storm that is. No, but yeah, that's basically the long and short of it, which, I feel like that detail only could exist now because of the Clone Wars TV show and a lot of the other canon related works that have been made. And I love details like that. I just wish they got put into the movies.
Person opposite me. 3, 2, 1.
Strongly. I'm going all the way over here.
Absolutely. Yeah,
it's just the coolest thing.
The best, yeah.
I mean, we became so close when we were doing the prequels, and just to get to come back and do this again, just to get to sit here and do this is such a trip.
It's just totally picking up where we left off. I mean, when we were on set together shooting for this TV series, it felt like the last 17 years didn't happen. It was very odd. You didn't look
that's how I felt about
a day older. It was so bizarre.
Yeah.
Well played.
Yeah, well done.
I would trust Tom Holland with a spoiler. 3, 2, 1.
Benedict Cumberbatch over here answering questions too. Aye. What sort of stuff is Benedict getting into these days? I haven't seen him in a whole lot. Aye. Let's see. Yeah, but anyways, that seems to be most of what seems to be going on as of right now with Star Wars, because it's not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot going on with Star Wars right now, and the only things that are interesting to talk about are the stuff that we already know and that we've already seen people talk about it to begin with. There's so much to this. I would say May 4th, right, is a day to celebrate Star Wars for what it was and for what it has consistently been, right? Which is just this amazing, monolithic, really well thought out and established franchise with all these different twists and turns, these different narrative cruxes, with all of these unique and interesting characters. You know, like, Star Wars has always been the franchise you go to when you want to experience something new. And I feel like that nowadays, that's not so much. That it's difficult to really find anything new with Star Wars these days. And the stuff that are being brought into Star Wars and that are kind of new just aren't really that different narratively and, like, gameplay or even anything like, you know, like, metaphysically. Nothing about what we're seeing today really adds anything deeper or new to the established canon. It just adds more depth. Like, it's like they're filling holes or vacancies in places, right? Like, you have to ask yourself, what was the purpose of telling this story? And the answer is that you didn't really need to at the end of the day. Like, you didn't need to tell this story. Like, I feel like Jedi Survivor, for example, was a story that's interesting on its surface, but what does it actually add to the overall canon? Not a whole lot, right? And, like, at the end of the day, we, you know, like, the fucking, I can't even remember the main character's name now. Shit, what was his name? I can't even remember anymore. But anyways, I am so terrible with names. But anyways, fucking, like, the story for the main character of Jedi Survivor, you know, like, he's very much tied to his own singular story and events. Like, he's doing nothing or gets involved in nothing that ties into the wider scope of the overall narrative. And even the elements that he does that do get introduced through him and through his story, like with the whole hubbub with the fucking, like, you know, Kobo's, you know, Jedi Academy, and then having the founder of that academy, you know, like, being some really well-respected and highly regarded Jedi from all the way back in the High Republic era, you know, being the one to come back and essentially be revived because of his actions. You know, like, these are all details, right, that never really get explored or further expanded upon. And they certainly don't come back to tie in any sort of real and meaningful way, especially with current canon, right? It's all very much just like, hey, this is a thing that's happening. Isn't this fucking cool? Type of story. And that's not what people really liked about old Star Wars. So, like, a lot of the things that was really cool about old Star Wars is that you could see is that it all attached in some strange and meaningful way, even if it's just subtle. Like, even the Old Republic story kind of hints at the potential, like, possibility and future of Anakin Skywalker, because it's kind of like a retreading of those same storytelling conventions, but with the possibilities being potentially like a sort of a rectification of what's going to come later, or a sort of like you know, a reaffirming of what's gonna happen later. You know, it has so many different twists and turns and flavors to it, and everything connects. You know, like, even George Lucas himself said that, you know, everything, you know, like, the way he does his storytelling, you know, like, you know, everything rhymes, sort of, and everything kind of, like, falls in a similar sort of, like, progression. And I feel like that kind of makes sense with the way that he was basically directing the movies and also kind of directed the franchise. But nowadays, I'm not too sure what to make of anything that's happening anymore. Like, you know, like, if it isn't, like, retelling the story of how the Death Star plans get stolen, or if it isn't, like, the occasional, like, reference to stuff that's going to happen in the movies, or, you know, like, trying to further expand upon, like, details of, like, the lore that don't really ever, you know, like, that have only ever been questioned and never really been answered. There isn't really a purpose, right, to any of the stuff that happens in the games or the expanded media content. Like, I feel like, well, not the expanded universe concept, but any of the actual additives for the current canon. Like, I feel like it's all just superfluous, right? Like, again, you remove Jedi Survivor, and what does it take away? Little to nothing. It doesn't add anything new to the story or to the elements of the Force that we already know or understand. It doesn't say anything about Star Wars. It doesn't really tell you anything about, like, what the lore is, or even, like, what the Force can potentially do, or the capabilities of what people can do in the Star Wars franchise. It all it really does is that it tells you a singular story about a Jedi trying to survive post Order 66, and that's a fine story to tell if you want to tell that story, but it's sad that this is like a consistent theming across different points of interest within the IP as of established, as of the current establishing of the existing canon. It just doesn't add anything new. And while adding something new, granted, could potentially add details and in storytelling ramifications for some of the decisions that are both made in the current films, as well as like changing of details for some others that honestly don't make any sense. It kind of would just make it suck. Like, people were kind of pissed off that Ki-Adi-Mundi's age got retconned as a result of the Acolyte, because he got introduced in the Acolyte. And though he had traditionally standard human years in the Star Wars franchise, in the expanded universe canon, right? They had to rectify this decision for him to exist in the Acolytes for the TV show's canon, just to serve as a fucking reference. And people wouldn't have had a big deal with the retcon. And I feel like this is a consistent theming as well. Like, people wouldn't have a terrible opinion about retcons in the Star Wars IP if the retcons made sense or were at least justifiable, right? Them putting Ki-Adi-Mundi in the Acolyte doesn't really serve any purpose other than to kind of ask more questions, and also to, kind of just like be an obvious reference to something that's obviously, established in something else, right? He's from, oh, look, it's that guy with the big head from the movies. It's not, that's all his fucking existence serves, is to just be like, hey, you're the guy from the fucking movie. You're the guy with the big head from the movies. Type of thing. It's meant to be a reference, and it serves more so as a reference than it really does as like a device, like a defining moment in the story. Like, it doesn't add anything new. It really is just there to exist for no reason other than to be a reference. And that's the thing, and I think that's the major problem that people took with his introduction into the Acolyte, is that they basically added him in, and they retconned his age simply just so that they could have a stupid fucking throwaway reference to the prequel movies, which nobody cared about. And that really does rub people the wrong way. Like, I would be I'm fine with references. I'm totally fine with the occasional throwaway reference here and there to some, just things I've already seen. But when it's this blatant and it's this obvious, and it serves literally no purpose, it's like it kind of fucks with it a little bit, right? It kind of fucks with things. It kind of like middles. It kind of like this. It makes it a little middling. Like, you want your references to make sense. Like, you want your references to feel like they have weight or some type of meaning to it, right? This one did not. And that's the biggest problem I think most people have with it. It's a problem I certainly have with it. And no, I have not seen The Acolyte either, but granted, you would be hard-pressed to get me to sit down to watch anything that Disney makes these days. I haven't seen The Book of Boba Fett, I haven't seen The Acolytes for obvious reasons, and I haven't seen the Rise of Skywalker for also equally as obvious reasons. It's just, these are all duds. These are all bastardized works of a really well-oiled machine and a really great franchise that I don't want to see. I just don't want to see. I don't want to see people's fan fiction of Star Wars. I want to see real Star Wars. I want to see true to form Star Wars. But that's hard to ask because people are taking too many liberties with it and aren't being fucking consistent about what Star Wars even is. And that's where I think Disney needs to tackle the problems with the Star Wars IP, is that they need to get a firm grip of what Star Wars is, even if it's not the idea of what the fans think it is or even what George Lucas made it to be. You know, like, get their own idea and sense of what Star Wars is and then just roll with it. Because I don't think I need to, because even I think people can understand, right, when I say that the thing that killed the Star Wars sequel trilogy was not so much The Last Jedi as it was what they did with it after, right? The Last Jedi kind of screwed the pooch, so to speak. It kind of did some things with not just the lore, but it did some things to characters that nobody appreciated and a lot of people hated. And instead of just like running with it, right? Instead of running with it, trying to make sense out of the madness, they basically decided to completely do a complete U-turn, kind of go in the other direction, and just was like, okay, we're gonna try and fix these problems now. And they basically had a finality that's basically an entire movie of just fixing problems that Rian Johnson created, and that's not really a great finale to any franchise when it should just be like this epic climactic conclusion to a really powerful and interesting saga or story line that you are focusing on. It should not be playing catch up or trying to fix problems from like the last movie. It should just be running with what's established and then just fucking cementing it, right? It should just be concluding all of these factors, and it didn't do that. Instead, it tried to wrap it all under one bow while trying to conclude that same story. It's a bastardized work, and that's the most disappointing factor of all, is that Star Wars is very much this bastard work of fiction that is no longer what it once was. It's basically like if someone from outside of the church came into the church, rewrote the whole Bible, and basically said Jesus didn't just walk on water. He also met Chuck Norris, who had traveled backwards in time after running in the opposite direction from where the planet is spinning, and he basically met Chuck Norris, and Chuck Norris taught him how to swim on land. And so now Jesus, using both the gifts that God had given him and learn the strengths and the absolute absurdity of Chuck Norris, he is now able to not only walk on water, he is able to swim on land, and on occasion, he can not just turn off the sun. No. He can turn on the shadow. You see how fucking ridiculous that such a bastardized ass backwards thing that would be. That's the equivalent of what Star Wars is going through. It's basically like taking everything you've ever loved, everything you've ever understood and appreciated about a particular subject matter or thing, and then having someone come in and basically be like, nah, but then what if this happened? And then this thing happened. And what if we did this thing? And it's just like, no, shut your fucking pie hole. Nobody wants to see this. Nobody wants to hear this. I don't even want to think about this, right? This is why I became so interested in writing. This is why I went down the path of wanting to be a writer. It's why I thought about being an author. It's because I wanted to tell stories that don't get told anymore, and because I want to be put back into media. And I don't see these stories anymore. And I know a lot of people could probably appreciate these stories. I might not be able to pull them off, but I thought, I fucking give it a good go. But that's ultimately what got me into writing stories and being an author, is because I wanted to tell stories that are on the similar level of the things that came before. And it's not that different from the reasons and motivations of why other people did the same exact fucking thing. Like, people wanted to tell stories about stories that they've already seen and that they've already appreciated from fiction as is. Like, how many stories today can we attribute to the works of Shakespeare or any other type of works that are made by anybody else, or even just like even like a sort of like psychological pieces. Like how many people have taken sort of like a points from Lovecraftian mythology and works, and just well, I wouldn't say mythology, but they basically took in a page from Lovecraft and have tried to replicate the same sort of like it's so bad and so uncannily monstrous and mysterious that it becomes good, right? Like the unknowable, the unattainable knowledge, and the completely like vague and in sort of like dangerous sort of like monstrosities that could possibly exist in our world, in our lifetime, that we just could not begin to fathom, even if we tried to understand it. Like these type of stories, all like we have so many different types of stories that try to channel so many different types of other stories and mediums that it becomes unique and interesting by default, especially depending on how it's handled. But like all in all, like even Star Wars is a reference to other forms of work in media. Like it was very much like inspired by old like 70s and like 60s type of like shows, like God, what was it like Flash Gordon or something like that. It was very much a spoof of like the science fiction stories and things that came before, and George Lucas ran with that. But he also added some more flavor to it. He added more depth to it by also making it a spoof of Japanese samurai films and among other things. It's such a collage of different sort of like inspirations and motivations that the IP just kind of exploded into something else entirely. And that's ultimately what Star Wars is that it's an IP that basically is defined by its own metrics because it's so goddamn unique in the sense that its inspirations are so innovative, and the way that it's been handled, it makes it so much more different than things that have come before. Like I could go on and on about storytelling conventions and writings and other things, right? But it's just like Star Wars really is just that franchise, at least to me, that has so much potential, and it's so squandered by simpletons. I'm not even saying this to be an asshole. I'm not even saying this to be an elitist. It is genuinely disgusting how much Disney has fucked up in regards to their handling and managing of this IP. Like, even if it means having to fuck with everything that came before, right? At least have the gumption to own the mistakes and embrace them, right? George Lucas did that. Like, he very much, when he made the prequel stories, like, he had to own up to the fact that he had made mistakes, and he learned to embrace them. He went back, right, to the Anakin Skywalker storyline, and he added more details that weren't featured in the films. He made details and stuff that happened in the films that seemed like really weird and innocuous design decisions and choices narratively, like for his characters and in the story of that world to eventually make sense, right? Disney hasn't even made Sidious coming back made sense yet. And all they have to do is just canonize the clone sock. All they have to do is just recanonize the Palpatine coming back as a clone saga storyline. Basically be a thing. And you know what's funny is that could have been the easiest excuse as to what made Luke Skywalker into the hermit that he was, because if they had decided to do that for the story of the sequel movies, They could at least use that as a reason why Luke Skywalker turned into a hermit, because he went to the dark side. He flirted, he was tempted to, and he actually went into the dark side in the clone storyline for how Palpatine came back in the expanding the universe content. And they could have told that story. They could have told that story, but they didn't. They didn't, because they were so fucking, like, concerned about not stepping on any toes that they had basically done nothing. In their attempts to please everyone, they pleased fucking no one. And look, I don't think the critics, in the way that they look at fans, especially when the Star Wars movies were coming out, were at all came from a place of genuine love and appreciation for Star Wars as, like, as a whole. But even I have to concede and agree on one point, which is the fact that they should have just ran with the script and just did it, right? Because at least, even if it's dog shit, we can respect the fact that they stuck with the dog shit, right? They told an actual story instead of whatever the fuck that was. Anyways, that's basically the long and short of that. I feel like this has been, God, it's already 2.5 hours. I feel like this has been a very, I guess, an interesting use of my time, and also just of today's stream in terms of, like, celebrating Star Wars. I could play a Star Wars game. I could do something else that isn't just me talking about Star Wars into the void about things, right? But, I got nothing, right? I didn't even know what game I was going to play when I got in. It's kind of why I made that poll, because it's like I could play The Force Unleashed, I could play this and that, I could do whatever, but I don't know what to play, because I genuinely already played these Star Wars games, and while I could play these games, I don't think, like, unless people were interested to see it, I don't think there's a game that in particular that I can think of off the top of my head that it's just like, it would be a really great series to start, or a really great game to play on stream. This game would be really great on stream. Like, I think Knights of the Republic would be a great game to play. It's not great. I wouldn't say it's great in terms of, like, streaming content, maybe necessarily, but it's certainly good as a video series if you want to see someone play through the game and you don't have to play through it yourself. I mean, I don't know. But otherwise, yeah, other than Knights of the Republic, I can't think of anything else that's actually worth really streaming. And it's mainly due to the fact that these games are just fun. And that's another thing, is that these games are just fun and enjoyable. They're not meant to be story focused unless it's Knights of the Old Republic. Most of these games are just fun, and they're just exciting to play. There's nothing really, like, interesting to talk about outside of the fact that they're just fun and engaging to play as games. But otherwise, yeah, I guess I could just cut it here then. Really, I guess, if you think about it. At any rate, yeah, so Star Wars Celebration came and went. Nothing new under the sun. Star Wars is currently in limbo. The franchise is looking kind of bleak these days. There is some hope and some silver linings here, but there's nothing really worth investing any sort of, like, thought or time into. I would recommend, right, that if you're interested in wanting to engage in Star Wars or wanting to do something for Star Wars for May the 4th, I would say definitely play one of these games. They're really good, especially Knights of the Old Republic. I would highly recommend Knights of the Old Republic. If not, the first one, second one's pretty good too. It's an unfinished classic, but it's a classic that at least, like, isn't, like, half-baked. Like, it's kind of half-baked, but it doesn't feel half-baked. Only until the end do you really feel the strain of the unfinished nature of the game. But there's mods to help alleviate that fact. You know, like, they've brought back some old content through, like, the restore content mod for this game, among other things. I feel like that, though, if you really wanted to just, like, have a pretty easy delve into Star Wars video game-wise, Dark Forces is a pretty great starting point. And if you don't want to play something that looks, you know, like, pretty dated, kinda, just with revamped graphics, you could always just go straight into, like, Jedi Survivor, or play The Force Unleashed, because that's a, you know, like, as much as the story is just kind of there to, you know, like, to fuel the, you know, like, the kind of action and set pieces that'll be happening therein, you know, like, it's still a pretty decent story. And it's also, you know, just another referential Star Wars story from, like, the movies and stuff. And if you're someone who really likes tactics, if you're someone who really likes Ghost Recon or Rainbow Six before Rainbow Six became what it is now, among other things, or if you just like Ready or Not, Republic Commando's got your fix. Republic Commando, if you could play it on console, or you can find a way to run it on your fucking computer, this game will easily scratch that itch. And I would highly recommend it. But otherwise, you know, Jedi Survivor, Souls-like Star Wars, tells an actual story. And though it does tie into a lot of the movie canon, well, not the movie canon, but like the Disney canon Star Wars, it's still a really good, solid experience. And it's at least referential to Star Wars in all of the right ways and less of the wrong ones, right? So I would give Jedi Survivor a go, and if you don't want to play Survivor because maybe it's too expensive right now, Fallen Order's another thing you can try and tap into. And if last time I checked, as of right now, right, we currently have a publisher sale for EA that basically is just like, hey, you can play these games right now. Here it is, $6. You can play Fallen Order for $6, my guy. And you can play Jedi Survivor for $20. If you want to get a Star Wars fix right now, it's easy. You got Battlefront 2. I mean, it's not as good as the classics, but you can still, it's still a solid, I wouldn't say it's as robust as the classics, but Battlefront 2 as it is right now is actually a pretty good game than how it started. And I would recommend this game if you just want to mash action figures together, or you just want to play out certain battles and fantasies in your mind from the Star Wars movies and mythos. They also recently remastered Star Wars Bounty Hunter, which I've never played it. I couldn't tell you. I mean, I played a little bit of Bounty Hunter on console, but I've never actually went and played this version of it, so I wouldn't know. Lego Star Wars is also a very easy way to get into it as well. Oh, wow, actually, oh, no, that's Fallen Order still. I couldn't tell you anything about Squadrons, because despite the fact that I have it, I've never played it. But, yeah, you have options here. And if you want to celebrate Star Wars, there's plenty of avenues to do it. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and cut it there. It's a little bit of a short stream than usual, but there's not really much to say or do outside of maybe playing a Star Wars game that I've already played on the channel, and I don't really feel like doing that right now. So, that being said, and if nothing else, may the 4th be with you, and have a nice rest of your guys' day. Bye-bye.